Let's start with a provocation. The very systems we built to bring clarity to the job market, job boards, tracking systems, they're now the main reason it's so opaque. They were built to connect people, but now they systematically hide the most crucial information. We're looking at a complete collapse of that whole paradigm.
Okay, collapse is a big word. That sounds like a total system failure, not just something that's gotten a little inefficient. Are you really saying the entire model is broken at its core, that the architecture is just wrong? Or is this just a case of them being old and cluttered?
No, it's fundamentally broken. The architecture is failing because it was designed for an entirely different era. It was built when the problem was getting enough information. We don't have that problem anymore. Now the bottleneck is interpretation. We are literally drowning in data but starving for actual meaning.
So the promise of connection and clarity has become distortion and opacity. And if the real problem is interpretation, then any solution has to be about understanding, right? That leads us straight to the core idea of this paper, alignment. I'm guessing this isn't just about people getting along. How does the paper define it? What's the engineering definition?
Exactly. In this framework, alignment is not some fuzzy feeling. It's a measurable state. It's achieved when you have coherence across three specific layers. First, mutual intent. Second, compatible assumptions. And third, operational readiness. When and only when all three of those are locked in, does it actually make sense for two parties to collaborate? Okay, so it's a technical definition, not a psychological one. It's about whether a stable bridge can even be built between two people. But before we get into how to build that bridge, I want to go back to why the old ones are failing. The paper is pretty obsessive about this idea that there's some kind of invisible force breaking everything.
That invisible force, the fundamental flaw, is what the paper calls the architecture of assumptions. It's this hidden layer that sits underneath every single interaction, shaping what everything means before anyone even says a word. So the real problem isn't the conversation itself, it's what we bring to the conversation. The unstated, maybe even unconscious beliefs we all carry around. That's a huge challenge. All right, let's dig into that. How do we deconstruct this invisible architecture?
Okay, to really get this, we have to follow the paper's logic step by step. We'll start with the collapse we just talked about, then really dissect that invisible architecture of assumptions. After that, we'll look at the proposed arena for fixing this, conversation, and the mechanics of what they call drift and repair. And we'll wrap up with the most important part, the ethical constraints, a future built on restraint.
Sounds like a plan. Let's start with that invisible architecture.
Right. So you can think of assumptions as the underlying grammar for how we make sense of anything. They're the silent rules we use to interpret the world. And if there's a mismatch at that level, well, coherent communication just becomes impossible.
Okay, but if this is the core problem, we need more than just a concept. We need a framework to actually analyze it. I'm sure the paper does more than just say, watch out for assumptions. It must classify them, right? So break it down for me. What are the different levels here?
It does. It identifies three distinct levels. First, you have your explicit assumptions. These are the ones we state out loud, the things we can actually debate. Then you have implicit assumptions. These are unstated, but you can usually get to them with the right questions. But the real danger, the one that causes systems to fail, is the third level, unset assumptions. These are expectations that neither person even knows they have. They're completely invisible until they blow up.
The classic unknown unknowns. So it's a hidden vulnerability just waiting to be triggered? That seems incredibly volatile. What happens when you throw human emotion into that mix? Does that just act like an accelerant on this already unstable structure?
That's the key insight. Emotion isn't just noise you need to filter out, it's a critical signal. The paper argues that when you see emotional volatility, what you're really seeing is assumption flux. That sudden change in someone's mood isn't random. It's a sign that one of their deep core assumptions has just been violated, and their whole way of seeing the situation is shifting in real time.
So emotion is basically a seismograph for this hidden architecture. It tells you when the ground is shifting underneath. And something like a resume or a form, it's completely blind to that. It's a static document trying to describe a dynamic, volatile human system, which I guess brings us to the paper's core proposal, the controversial one.
Right. The paper posits that the only place to solve this is in conversation. Not because conversations are perfect, far from it, but because conversation is the only structure that can actually survive contact with the messiness of human nature.
Wait, that seems completely backward. Conversations are messy. They're emotional. They're full of ego. Why on earth would you choose to build a system on such a fragile, unpredictable foundation?
It's chosen for its messiness, not in spite of it.
The paper's argument is that conversation is the only medium that has enough bandwidth. It's where you can detect all those high-dimensional signals, tone of voice, hesitation, pacing. And most importantly, it's the only place where you can do real-time repair. A static form is brittle. It shatters the second it hits any ambiguity. A conversation can adapt.
Okay, I see the logic. You're talking about it like it's a technical substrate. But how do you actually build a reliable system on it? How can you possibly apply scientific measurement to something so subjective? You're dealing with hidden motives, internal stories people are telling themselves. How do you measure that?
And that is a critical distinction the paper makes. You can't measure the internal state. You can't measure desire or subconscious resistance. That's a black box. But what you can measure are the signals they produce. You can measure when someone states an expectation. You can measure a contradiction in what they're saying. You can measure those moments of emotional volatility. The goal isn't to read someone's mind. It's to map the coherence of the model they're presenting to you.
I see. So you're not measuring the thing itself. You're measuring its observable effects, its artifacts, which implies that alignment isn't some destination you reach and then you're done. It has to be a dynamic state, something that's constantly being managed, right?
Exactly. It's not a switch you flip on or off. The paper describes it as a volatile curve. At any given moment, alignment is either being maintained or it's degrading.
Okay, so walk me through that curve. What are the key phases?
So it starts in what's called pre-alignment. That's where all the assumptions are hidden. Then you have the emergent phase. That's first contact, where the risk of a misfire is incredibly high. If you navigate that, you can get to a stabilized alignment. But here's the most important part. That stability is temporary. The natural state of any aligned system is degradation. Drift is the default. Entropy always wins. Okay, so if drift is the natural state, if things are always falling apart, what's the antidote? And I'm guessing the answer isn't just have another conversation.
The antidote is repair. But the paper is very clear. Repair is an unnatural act. It's not something humans do easily. We instinctively avoid it because it means admitting we were wrong, it requires humility, and it risks conflict. So any system that relies on alignment has to have a very structured, very disciplined process for repair.
Right. It needs to be an engineered process. So what does that look like? What is the architecture of a repair loop? It can't just be a suggestion to say, hey, wait, I'm confused.
It's a 5-step process. First, you pause. You have to interrupt the momentum to stop more damage from being done. Second, you surface the uncertainty. You explicitly state what isn't known. Third, you map the divergence, pinpointing exactly where the misunderstanding happened. Fourth, you reconstruct shared meaning, but you do it by offering interpretations as hypotheses, not as facts. And finally, you reestablish pace, which is about resetting the emotional load. This entire loop is what allows for coevolution, where both people adapt together. It's not about finding a static match, it's a dynamic convergence.
Looking at this whole framework, it seems to prioritize safety and control above everything else. Above speed, above efficiency. It's all about slowing down, pausing, checking for errors. Which leads directly to the final and probably most critical principle in the paper.
Exactly. When you're building a system to operate in the unstable domain of human interaction, its safety is defined by what it refuses to do.
But that's a total paradox, isn't it? Especially with AI. As a system gets more capable, as it gets better at reading people and understanding nuance, why on earth would you intentionally cripple it with constraints?
Because unconstrained capability isn't intelligence, it's just risk. Think about it. The better a system gets at understanding someone's emotional state, the more powerful it becomes as a tool for manipulation. The goal isn't maximum capability. The goal is safe, truthful interaction. And to get that, you must constrain capability.
So this is the real ethical heart of the whole architecture. Okay, let's make it concrete. What are those hard lines, the non-negotiable constraints? What is the system absolutely forbidden from doing?
These are the load-bearing walls of the system. It can never infer hidden motives without explicit consent. It can never engage in emotional steering. It cannot use persuasion while pretending to be neutral. It's forbidden from fabricating assumptions just to make a model work. And it absolutely cannot exploit any power imbalance. These rules are what protect human dignity. Which means the ultimate goal isn't really alignment, is it? It's truthful interaction. And that implies that sometimes the most truthful and successful outcome is realizing that alignment just isn't there.
That's exactly right. Non-alignment is a perfectly legitimate and often desirable outcome. The system's job is to be a guardian of clarity, not a machine for forcing outcomes. Preventing a harmful mismatch is a success. It's a victory.
So the whole argument, when you boil it all down, is that the future of this kind of technology won't be defined by how powerful it is, but by how wise it is.
Yes. The integrity of any system like this will be defined by what it refuses to do. It has to be an architecture built on humility, a deep respect for human complexity. The goal is not to force alignment. It's to create a safe space where real alignment can be discovered if it exists without any form of coercion. So in the end, the true measure of this kind of intelligence won't be its raw capability, but its self-awareness. A system that truly understands its own limits. That feels like a necessary foundation for whatever comes next.